across this country and help many leaders in First Nation communities. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on to Senator Rain, to be followed by Senator Christmas.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, Mr. Calla, for you to be here, and for the First Nation Coalition, Major Projects Coalition, which is showing so much potential. And, you know, I agree that it is showing its success, and we need to move quickly to capitalize on that. I personally understand that the way it's being set up now, and correct me if I'm wrong, will put you in a position as individual First Nations to take advantage of opportunities as they come along without missing the boat, so to speak, as we did on some of the projects in the past. My question is, I realize you will need to have full cooperation of not only the taxpayers of Canada through the federal government with loan guarantees, which to me makes so much sense, but also with provincial governments and with the people in your regions that may be influenced by outside interests that want to stop progress. So is the coalition able to I know that to do that you need to work together, but there are always people who for one reason or another may want to put up a roadblock that's not necessary. So how does the coalition deal with those kinds of negative influences?
So the coalition is not a project-specific organization, and we do not advocate for or against projects. It's up to the communities to work together and to submit a request to the coalition if they're interested in reviewing a project. What we do is we provide facts, we provide information, we provide technical support for them to make an informed decision. If it's something that is going to work for their people, and if it's an infrastructure that they want to be involved in, but it's up to the communities.
Could I just ask a supplementary on that? Because there was mention of the need for a First Nation national institution, and I was getting a little bit worried that you could build another bureaucracy, but I understand now your organization is a support organization, and the authority rests with the First Nation in dealing with every specific project.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Christmas, to be followed by Senator Hartling.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, I just wanted to express my congratulations and my appreciation for the work that you are doing, and in particular, the First Nations Financial Management Board, the work that you have done. And I'm very impressed with the work you're doing as a First Nations Major Projects Coalition. I fully share your vision, Mr. Calla, about the need to develop First Nations institutions that are led by First Nations people. And I think I can share this comment with all of us, that I think you've given us a glimpse into what nation to nation looks like on the ground. And so thank you for that. That's very inspiring, and I'm so pleased you're able to talk about that. I guess my question is for Chief Blackwater and maybe for Mr. Calla. I was very, very, very inspired by your story of your community coming out of third-party management with the assistance of the First Nations Financial Management Board. And I loved your portrayal that you've invested hope in not only those communities, but I think for a lot of people in the process. And I loved your comment that the old approach has to go. And I'm very familiar with the current or the former government's way of dealing with First Nations and third-party management. You're almost stigmatized. You're nobody. You're nothing, right? It's a horrible approach. And to contrast it with the approach that you've gone through, Chief, and with the help of the First Nations Management Board of investing in communities and providing that service, I think it was described free of charge. Chief, could you sort of elaborate on that a bit more? How the First Nations Management Board, how a First Nations institution, by investing in your community, has brought that hope and has turned your community around into a prosperous one. Could you sort of tell us more about your story?
Okay, hope we got a lot of time. Laughter is always a good medicine.
It is.
When I first came on council, I was back in 1998 for a 1 year, 2 year term. And then I heard there was challenges and stuff like that. And I left my community altogether and moved back when I ran for council, chief and council, in 2013. I won that, I got a seat on the council. I lost the chieftainship by 2 votes. But then during that time frame, it was the same old story again. You know, council was still talking about the same things, and we're not moving anywhere, right? You know, so one of the things that I did do is start talking to the community, and I said, you know, like, we can't be stuck in this place forever. We need change, but we can't have change if you don't have courage. So I was doing a lot of campaigning for 2 years, saying what kind of approach that I'd be using. When the next election came in 2015, I made it in as a chief, and I won by a landslide because people wanted to change. But while I was on council on October 1st, 2014, we slipped from co-management to third party, right? So one of the things that I did when I got in as chief is I went to see, I heard about the First Nation Financial Management Board and went to talk to Harold Callan. I told him that we need to do something different. What is it out there and stuff like that, right? So in that meantime, and then we signed a letter of cooperation, and we talked about the fiscal, financial, administrative law, and the Financial Management Act, and all of that. And then with our third party, MNP, we told them that we needed to do something different. And INAC, we told them we needed to do something different. So I got them all together, and we met with them as council. And we said that, you know, MNP, that's our third party managers at the time, we need to move beyond what it is. We have the expertise, and we have the trainings, and we have all the internal resources to do things on our own. We just need to be taught how to do it properly, right? And I says, we can't do that when you're no different from INAC, because INAC was sitting right there. INAC tells us what to do and how to do it, or they do it for us. We don't want you to do it for us. How can we be self-governing on our finances if we don't learn how to do that? So we need things, and then at Band Council, before that meeting ended, we passed a motion that we're going to have a partnership with our third-party managers and INAC. So that means that they came at every newly convened meeting that we had monthly. Transparency. We told INAC, you're not a funding agency when you're sitting here. You're a partner. You see what it is we're doing. We see our governance, how we present governance. And if we see that we're doing it wrong, let us know and guide us through the process of how to, what it is. Don't do it for us, and don't tell us that we're not capable of doing it. And we told third-party managers, you know, like, we don't want you here forever. Because how can we get out of third party if we're paying you an astronomical amount of money, right? So So we got that understanding. And then we had an in-camera meeting with council. I called an in-camera meeting with council, and I said, there's 8 councillors and myself as chief. And I said, the first thing we need to do is put all our crap on the table and get over our frustrations with each other and learn how to get along. Because if we can't do that, we can't see the bigger picture of doing the best that we can for our community. So we had to take care of our own issues first. And then when we came back in and started doing business, it made a hell of a lot of difference. We called the RDG, at that time it was Eric Magnuson. We called him to our community and we showed him how we live. Right? We brought him to our houses, 5 houses, and he said, would you live in this kind of environment? I challenge you to bring your family and live in this house and survive. Right? So then we brought him back to the table. I said, we're not here to argue with you and demand anything. What we'd like you to do is make a commitment to invest in a warm, safe, and dry renovation project. So you're investing, and in order to do that investment, we need some guidance and additional monies to get our housing policy and so your investment stays safe for decades ahead. So we're the richest third-party First Nation in BC. Where else would you get 1.3 million warm, safe, and dry housing renovation for a 5-year commitment? We're just starting, we're just completing our 3rd year, negotiating our 4th year, and got 2 more years to go. But our approach is different. Rather than selective houses before and renovation stuff like that, we had a firm come in, Santec, I believe they're called. They did a housing assessment and all of 134 houses, every house in our community. 1,600-page report after, 1,600 pages. So based on that, we had our third-party managers decipher that 1,600 pages because they're getting paid a lot of money anyway, right? You might as well put them to work, right? You know, so they did that. So then when we called INAC back, and then we said, this is what we need per year for housing renovation because we're going to take care of every house in the community, not one's going to be left out. So we started with the key needs first, which is the roofs. You should have seen all our roofs. It was just horrible. So we changed all the roofs, replaced all the roofs in our community. Then we worked with the furnaces. Then we worked with the disabled. We made sure everything, the disabled and the elderly had the proper stuff. All of those things are in phases, right? So our people are warm, safe, and dry. That's a start. And we called Alison Rowe and Catherine Appel back because Catherine Appel is our new RDG. And I said, see the difference, see the investment you made? Look at the people now. Instead of being upset, frustrated, and having no sense of life, our people are lifted up now, just on that little housing repair. So, you know, and when I see that, you know, I don't know, I hear a lot of chiefs in BC are getting paid a salary, you know, but we don't. I get $750 a month honorarium, but I spend maybe 6-8 hours a day, including weekends in the office, making sure everything's in order. You know, whatever the leadership will do that, right? It's commitment from the heart, because people come in for a reason, one reason only, because they want to change. And when I all talking about jurisdiction, and that's another approach that we're looking at from the Gitxsan Nation, is jurisdiction on our own. Because one of the key things is, you know how it always is, it's from the top down, INAC, down to us. With us and Gitxsan Nation and Gitxsan, it's community design, can really let everything from the bottom up. Because it's our people who actually know the needs and how to address those needs. So those are the things that we work on as in Gitxsan. And we're proud to say that, you know, and that to say that we've designed and implemented a new approach of self-sustainability, growth, because it's one of the things is that I seen on council table while I was still in council is they're demanding, the arguing and all of that. It didn't get anywhere. So we had to do a different approach, and that's what we did. And I believe that, well, I don't believe, I know, okay. I know not only BC headquarters of INAC, but the national headquarters of INAC took a lot of recognition of what it is we're doing, because Catherine Lapel and Alison Rowe, before she moved on to public services, approached me and they said, we would like you to be on our mentorship program to share with other First Nations, not only in BC, but across Canada, Gitxsan approach, because that is different, completely different from what we're used to. And it's really working, right? We're in recipient appointed advisory now, and our goal is to be out of that and self-management within 2 years.
Well, congratulations, Chief. I appreciate your story. If I can just have one more supplementary question to Mr. Calla. You mentioned in your comments that you thought that the INAC regional offices had to have a different relationship with headquarters, and I assume with First Nations. Could you elaborate on why you think that needs to change?
I think we all become comfortable with what I'll call our turf. Okay. And so as we move to different approaches, those that feel they own the turf have to be prepared to change. But at the same time, those who currently have the responsibilities on that turf need to be relieved of those responsibilities, okay? If we're moving into an alternative default program, management program, which is fundamentally different in that, as I see the program as it existed, there's an initiative to balance the financial ratios. That's the primary objective. Our approach is to develop the capacity to see Gitxsan pass a financial administration law, begin to work on financial management system certification. So they're developing policies, procedures, and rules where they can conduct their business. This gives the confidence to partners to support the initiatives that they have underway. That's a different approach. And our belief is that through that process, eventually the financial ratios will come into line. Our framework is consistent with an international standard called COSO. And so we're very comfortable, and our rating, our work has been vetted by accounting houses, everything. And so the rating agencies and investment banks looked at what we do and how our approach through certification, and gave the First Nation Finance Authority an investment grade credit rating, and it's improving. So there is some confidence in what we're doing, but it starts out fundamentally different. We say, yes, they have some financial issues today, and yes, we have to manage those, but you manage them not just by removing discretionary funding and putting it in the bank until the ratios are in line. You fix it by investing in their capacity to make their own decisions and manage their own affairs. And what the Financial Management Board does is support them in their work and advise them from the get-go. It is their work. We're not coming in to do the work. They're going to do the work, and we're going to help you.
Senator Hartling, to be followed by Senator Doyle.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning. Nice
morning.
to see you, and thank you very much for being here. It's such a pleasure to listen to your story and your message of hope. It's very inspiring, and it's a message for all Canadians. But as leaders, I wanted to address this to Chief Thomas and Councillor Gale, is that as leaders in your community and being a part of that and this message of hope, is it difficult sometimes, and how do you deal with building the trust and the hope, especially given the history of our government with Indigenous people? And, how do you, because I know sometimes that must be hard, what do you do and how can you do that? And how can we here at the Senate and in our own community support you and encourage you?
Before I came down here, I'm doing my 4th term as chief. On Saturday before I came down, I actually have an all-woman council now in Sycus. And I'll do my little happy dance. We've had a focus on our children and returning our children home. I don't know how much of you have read Ed John's report on reunification and return of our children. Because we have over 40 children in care for Sycus. And before I left on Saturday, we actually made the ministry and the service agencies bring the children to our community, because what we were finding was in the plan of care for each child, they were not being brought home as they're required to. We have protocol agreements with agencies, and to see the parents, and not all the children, but a lot of them came, and to see the parents happy, and it gave them hope that we're a council that follows our word. We have integrity. When we say things, we mean it, and we're there for our community, because it's our goal to eventually bring these children all home. And I think that we're not in as bad a place as other communities in terms of how many children that are gone. And we missed out on that PTP equity. We did miss out on that equity. Asked from 2 years ago, that was brought up earlier, and we're hoping to not have missed that boat again. We are in the process of doing a financial feasibility for the Kenny Dam water release facility, and if we can see that it is a money-making opportunity, then we can move on with that decision, and that's going to give our people hope, and it's not going to give just my community, but all the downstream, including municipalities downstream of us that depend upon that water system. So from small things to big things, economics to children, those are 2 examples I can give you.
Chief Gale? So, Gale?
We have a really great chief. His name's Harrison Dickey, and very proud of him. I'm very proud of my council too, and I'm very honored to be here. Thank you, Madam Chair. So every day when I wake up, I'm very thankful to be alive and to be Dene. So I've been on my council for 9 years, and I'm a former chief, and I'm very proud of past leadership and past chief and councils, and I'm very proud of our members for continuing to wake up every day and face the challenges of life. But with that, we can't lose hope in our daily tasks. We got to stay focused. And I got to say that recently our community ratified a vote to secure funds for future generations and locked in a trust for 100 years so that we can continue to do the work on the ground and hope that one day that money will just mean nothing, because we're business partners, we're partners with investors, we're working with proponents, we're working with our local governments and the province in Canada. I can only imagine that our future looks bright. That's the only thing I could ever imagine, because there's no going backwards. We just hope that the work that we're doing now, our children and our grandchildren won't have to be still sitting at the table talking to you guys about to get to where we need to be. But through the work of the coalition, through presentation, through expertise and professionals coming forth, it's given us a lot of knowledge of how we can do things better. Our community has recently set up a corporation called Daytai, which means the 3 rivers that run into our community. And that's a start. That's a start to separate the business from the politics and to stay focused. Another thing that we're looking at doing, and we are working towards, is the Central Finance Office. So all our businesses will go through, and all our administration processes will go through one finance office, and we'll have our information readily available at all times. And then there's the daily community work, where our members are on the land, our crafters continue to make beautiful work and keep our traditions alive. So there's a lot of things that just happen in our community alone that continue to give us hope and to make us proud of who we are as people. So every day you got to face those challenges. And like I said, there's no turning back. And we will continue to ensure that our rights are respected. And we'll continue to work with you guys as partners. But I think the best way forward for all of us is to ensure that we have the tools and the capacity and the funding to work with you to make shared decisions in this country. That's the only path forward.
Thank you.
Chief Blackwater, did you wish to make a comment? No? Okay. Senator Doyle, to be followed by Senator Pate.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here. When we as a committee speak about First Nations and your hopes and your dreams and your aspirations and your problems, I automatically think of Labrador. I know that in Labrador, the provision of infrastructure didn't necessarily mean that all of the social problems were going to go away or be reversed or what have you. Simply because with the provision of infrastructure, there was very little economic development in the area. So I'm wondering, when you plan for an infrastructure project, does the plan automatically go hand in hand with a plan for economic opportunities as well in a certain area? Because I know in one part of Labrador, they developed a whole town and moved people into it. But there was little or no economic opportunity in that town. And as a result, the same problems continue to exist, what have you. But it leads me to believe that when you submit a plan for infrastructure, it's also necessary to have a long-term plan for economic development. Am I right?
Yes, you are, Senator. And in fact, one of the Financial Management Board's Financial Management System standards is to actually develop a community plan that will necessarily involve an economic plan. They get integrated. Part of the challenge that we have today is that too often the infrastructure program guidelines don't permit the investment in infrastructure for economic development. That fundamentally has to change. Our definition of what infrastructure is has to be expanded beyond sewer and water. It has to involve technology, broadband, software, computers, training. So the infrastructure that we need and how that's defined needs to fundamentally change. Because we don't know what the future holds. I was at a conference in Vancouver, an AFOA international conference, and an Aboriginal from New Zealand came and said, you know, we're putting our children in school today for jobs we don't know what those jobs will look like. And so the infrastructure we need to build and the investment we need to build in our people is to equip them to be in a position where they have the capacity to be able to respond to the opportunities that are there for the future. So infrastructure that includes economic development is absolutely necessary. If you can develop taxation systems on commercial properties, if you can support the provision of infrastructure, which is fundamentally what is possible through the Fiscal Management Act. These are the kinds of tools that we need to bring about so that, because at the moment, the challenge for the private sector, if they come onto reserve and want to build a project, they also have to pay for the infrastructure, generally. And they do not have to do that if they are not on reserve. And so we have to level that playing field, and we think an infrastructure institution can help do that with the support of the good work. And there is some very good work being done in the regions right now on this. So we think, yeah, you're absolutely right. But again, when we talk about a national institution, we're talking about a First Nation-led approach to doing this that involves regions and consultations and some effective management. And there are some really good examples of that are occurring in this country. The First Nations Health Authority in British Columbia is a very good example about how assuming the delivery responsibilities for health in the province are benefiting in our communities.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now turn to Senator Pate, and then we will move to second round, starting with Senator Tanis.
Great. Thank you very much to all of you, and congratulations on the efforts and the successes, and most importantly, that you've already achieved. It struck me as you were all speaking that there are many, Mr. Kelly, you've spoken about it recently, or I think it was 2015 in the Globe and Mail, about the dependency-inducing processes and some of the leadership that Minister Jody Wilson-Raybould has taken in the past and opportunities that are available now. And I'm curious as to whether some of the options you're looking at would involve some of the mechanisms that are being looked at both in the province and federally. And I'm thinking, for instance, one of the responsibilities Jody Wilson-Raybould has taken on, along with the Minister of Public Safety, is to implement the TRC recommendations around decarceration and investment in communities. And in line with Chief Thomas, the work you were talking about in terms of bringing children back, the amount of money that is put into foster care, adoption, and not into kinship care and into keeping children in community, as well as some of the discussions that are being had about piloting guaranteed livable income projects as opposed to social assistance schemes. And I'm just curious as to how, if you've been involved in some of those discussions, how you've been involved, and what kind of supports for that infrastructure development you'd be looking at to develop those. So I'm thinking of having specifically the provisions that already exist to allow for communities to take people out of prison, to keep kids out of care, and to change from a social assistance scheme to a guaranteed livable income scheme, and whether any of those options have been looked at, and how the Senate, any recommendations from this committee might assist those processes.
if I might start, you need facilities. You know, when we talk about infrastructure, we need facilities. And I think the fiscal relationship and the Infrastructure Institute need to look at how we can fast track the provision of facilities. We need to be smarter with the transfer money that's coming forward. We need to be able to monetize it. The First Nation Health Authority needs to build nursing stations in British Columbia. Do we wait 10 years for the annual contributions to flow through the funding agreement so they can build one nursing station a year? Or do we actually finance those nursing stations and put them in the ground? That concept has application throughout. Now, I was in Fisher River, Manitoba last week, providing them with a financial management system certificate. And I would encourage you, if you ever have the opportunity, to go and visit Fisher River. They're 2.5 hours outside of Winnipeg on Lake Manitoba, and have used the tools of the Fiscal Management Act, according to Chief Crate, to their advantage. They're building new schools, recreation centers. They have an economic engine within their own. They're capturing the economic leakage that was occurring. There's no one single answer to these challenges. You need to have an economy. You need to have employment opportunities. Bringing people home to what they have at home today is not a solution in of itself. And so you need to provide healthier communities for them to come home to. And I think that's, if there's a message here, yes, we have to do there's many things to be done at the same time. Mm-hmm. But I think you need to invest in the development of governance capacity and economic development, and improve the delivery of infrastructure procurement on reserve that supports multiple objectives, but one of which must be economic development. I always like to remind people that it's very difficult to build a healthy community or a housing program on the basis of welfare and shelter allowance. We need to develop economies and employment opportunities for our communities, in our communities. We will retain our cultures if we're able to stay in the regions that we come from. Mm-hmm. And there's no reason why we can't do that. And Fisher River is an excellent example of how that can be achieved and how they committed to doing that. I went into a work shack of the high school, and I understand Fisher River has the highest graduation rate in Manitoba of Aboriginal students. And there were 3 young men in there, and they said, yes, and we're 3 of them. Yeah. And they were working, and they were in jobs, and they're in apprenticeships. They're developing the skill sets. And I think that's going hand in hand with how we look at restoring our community's values and bringing our people home. They have to come home to something better than what's there today.
From a leadership and a community perspective, to answer to your question, that's one of the key things that we as a nation, Gitxan Nation, we've teamed up and joined up with Chewton First Nation. And as a Prince George, a few weeks ago, we presented a position paper on jurisdiction. That is key to First Nation life. And it's key to us. Our children are our children. They don't belong to nobody. Gitxan children are Gitxan children. Then you break it up to communities within the Gitxan Nation. So Gitxuka children belong to Gitxuka. And we are responsible for them, not nobody else. So when we do that and stuff like that, and that's when we presented a position paper with First Nation Health Authority, and informing them that we don't want them to venture off into the child and family services sector or education or anything for that matter, because that's no business of theirs. Each nation, each community is responsible for their children's social determinants, health, education, child and family services, economic development, all of that. It's our responsibility, and that's one of the things that we're moving forward to. And our council is working on designing and working with the Gitxan Child and Family Services to implement, design and implement a child welfare committee so that we have first say and the only say on our children. And just to let the senators know that I'm not only a chief and a board of director, I also work for Kitchen Child Family Services, a family enhancement worker. And that's my passion, is working with those children that don't have a voice and those that are struggling. And we had one child come home, and through our Kitchen Family Child Agency, and she was about 14, 15. And she cried and cried because that's the first time has she ever had any type of connection to her family, to her nation. It was just amazing just to see the impact, right? You know, in closing on this comment, you know, as I shared with you, I'm a survivor of residential school. I'm the named plaintiff in the atrocities of residential school. But there are some things that the aftermath of residential school that has a devastating impact on me as a human being.